We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara Meseches Moed Kattan. This is Moed Kattan Daf 5b. And the previous Amud, the Gemara said that one of the Talmudim of Rabbi Yana would make sure not to ask questions during the Shabbos of the Regal when there'd be a lot of people there, so as not to embarrass Rabbi Yana in public, lest he not know the answer to the question. So Rabbi Yana said about that Talmud Kari Aleh, he called about that Talmud the following pasuk: V'som derech erenu b'yesh Elokim, as Rashi over here says, Kari Aleh v'som derech shemechashe b'shos. This is a Talmud who considers what time it is. Eze mehen lahakshos, eze mehen shelo lahakshos, when he should ask a question, when he shouldn't ask a question. This was a praise that Rav Yana gave to this student. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ein mitzayin lo al kazayis min ames v'lo al etzem kesaora. We don't put markers up at grave sites if all you have is a kazayis from the dead body, or if all you have is a bone the size of a barley. V'lo al davar sheinu mitame ba'ohel. We don't mark anything which is not mitame ba'ohel. Aval mitzayin al ashedra v'al galgolas. However, we do put up markers. Let's say you have the spine, or you have the skull. Al rov binyan v'al rov minyan. You have majorities, which Rashi will explain. V'al rov minyan hames. Ve'in mitzayin al havados. We also don't put up markers on areas which are certainly areas where there's a grave site. Aval mitzayin al asfekos. But we do put up markers on the areas that are in doubt. Ve'eloin asfekos. The following are considered areas in doubt: sechachos, uperos, uveis hapras. All these will be explained in the Gemara. Ve'in ma'amidin siyun b'makom tumah shelo lahafsedas hataharos. And we also don't put up a tzion. We don't put up a marker at exactly the place where the tumah is. That's going to cause a loss to the taharos. In other words, you have to put up the marker at a little bit of a distance so people don't accidentally cause tumah to be conveyed to things that are supposed to be kept pure. Ve'in marchikin siyun mimakom tumah. We also don't put the marker too far away from the area of tumah shelo lahafsedas Eretz Yisrael, because then you're losing out on space that in Eretz Yisrael that can be used. In other words, we don't want to put the marker too close. We have to put it at enough of a distance so people won't accidentally make things tameh. But we don't put it too far either, because then you're taking land that really is pure land and you're marking it as tameh. And Rashi over here explains, even though the shedra from the spine, you only have one bone from the spine, metame tumah ba'oel, that's something that's metame ba'oel. Again, the general rule is you're only marking the kinds of tumah that are metame ba'oel. Rov binyano, what does it mean, rov binyano? Kagon atzamas gedolos. Let's say you have very large bones. Kagon kulyas afapi she'in bo rov minyano. Even though you don't have a majority in terms of the number of bones, but you have a majority because you have very large bones, and so therefore you have a majority of the actual bone of the body. Rov minyano means rov atzamos. You have a majority of bones. If you count out the number of bones in the body, if you have a majority here that are left, that also you have to be mitzayin. V'afapi she'in bo rov binyano. Even though you don't have rov binyan, you don't have a majority of the actual bone material, so to speak, but you have a majority of the bones, that also has to be marked. And the Brisa said, Ein mitzayin al havados. You don't put up markers on areas that are certain. That means hoel deborah l'kuli alma d'ispe tumah. If everybody knows there's tumah over here, vadoy is for certain. Lama tatali bo samakam taros. Nobody's going to carry taros in that area. You don't need to put up markers. Aval mitzayin al hasveikos, but you do put up markers on areas of doubt. Sheyesh alei an ohel, which have an ohel. In other words, any area which has an ohel over it, and there's a doubt about tumah. So there you have a tumas ohel situation. Could go in sechachos, pros, hasmuchos l'rishas harabim, hasmuchos hasamach lebeis hakvaros. Again, these are areas that are sort of overhangs near the rishas harabim and near the cemetery, and the Gemara will explain them exactly. The mesafka lon behutuma dekevin diyesh alein oel regilim likvor sham b'makam sanua. Since there's an oel over here and there's a doubt of tumah, but it's common to bury in an area that's private, so those are areas that you have to mark. Schachos upros beis hapras mefarish l'kamon. As we said, it's going to be explained later on what that means. Ein ma'amidin hatzion al hatuma shelo lahafset taharos. You don't put it exactly there. Shematuma mamish tachas hatzion. If the tumah is mamish right underneath the marker, ain't no margish. The guy's not going to realize that shabal hatzion until he comes right up to the grave. Pisom suddenly v'yatamu hataros, and then the things that he's trying to keep pure are going to become tameh. Sharei hatuma tachas hatzion, because the tumah is right under the marker. Elaosin hatzion samach l'tumah. You have to put the marker near the tumah, baracha kolshu, just a little bit of a distance. Ucheshaba al hatzion margish min hatuma ve'eno holach. That way, when he sees the marker, he'll realize there's tumah. He won't walk on top of it. But ein marchikin hatzion v'makom tumah yoser mikolshu. You don't put it any more than that, just a little distance away, not too much. Shelo lahafsed Eretz Yisrael. Otherwise, you're going to lose out on land in Eretz Yisrael. Shekasharoa hasimin miyad poresh v'nimtza Eretz Yisrael b'tumah shelo letzorach. It's going to end up that you're marking areas tameh in Eretz Yisrael for no need, for no reason. And the Gemara continues, is it really true that a kazayas from a dead body is not metame ba'oel? But the Gemara says, but we learned in a mission on oholos elu shemetamin ba'oel, the following are metame ba'oel, kizayis min ames, and one of them is a kizayis min ames. The whole premise above is that you don't have to mark areas which is not metame ba'oel, and kizayis min ames was one of those areas, but it's not true. Kizayis min ames is metame ba'oel. So Amar Papa says, Hacha bekizayis mitzumsam askinan. When we're saying you don't have to mark, we're talking about a situation where you have exactly a kizayis to sof michzar chaser, because at the end of the day, that kizayis is going to get smaller and smaller, and therefore mutav yisrafu all of truma v'kachim lefisha. It's better that, okay, for a momentary time, right now while it's a kizayis, you may have a situation where you accidentally have to burn truma and kachim that become tameh, but that's only going to be momentarily. It's going to deteriorate quickly. V'al yisrafu all of liolam. You shouldn't be burning forever, assuming that there's tumah here forever by putting a marker there. That's unnecessary. If it's exactly a kazayis, it will surely soon be smaller than a kazayis. And then the Brisa said, V'elumein asveikos, the following area are areas that are suffik, sechachos uperos, sechachos and peros. What does that mean? So sechachos means ilon hamesach ala oretz. Sechachos means you have a tree that's hanging over the earth again, so it's hanging over the area of the kever and over an area where the public are going. That's an area that again needs to be marked. Peros, what does that mean? Avonim peruos hayotzes menageder. You have these stones that are also kind of overhanging from a wall, from a fence. Those also are creating a kind of an ohel, and the area needs to be marked. And Beis HaPras, what is a Beis HaPras? Kiritanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, HaChoresh is HaKever. Let's say somebody plows over a gravesite, Hareu Osa Beis HaPras. That area becomes a Beis HaPras. V'kamahu Osa, how much of that area becomes a Beis HaPras? Mole Milo Ma'ana Meo Amma. It's the area of 1 furrow, 100 amos. But the Gemara says, Beis HaPras mi metame ba'oel. But 1 second, is a Beis HaPras, an area you plowed over the gravesite, is that even metame ba'oel? V'yamar Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel, but Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Minafeach adam Beis HaPras v'holech. A person can blow his way through a Beis HaPras, meaning you blow on the earth to uncover any tumah, and as long as you don't find any tumah, it's not a problem. Apparently, there's no problem of tumas oel. The fact that you're bending over these things, these have already been crushed up, they've been plowed over. It's only a problem if you touch them. Apparently, there's no problem of oel. So what are we saying over here? That Beis HaPras is an issue of tumas oel. Rav Yehuda bar Ami mishmei de Ula Amar, and Rav Yehuda bar Ami said in the name of Ula, Beis HaPras shenidosh tar, that again, if you have a Beis HaPras that's been trampled upon, it's totally tar. So Amar Rav Yehuda says, Lo kash is not difficult. Kan besada she'avad bo kever, kan besada she'nechrash bo kever. Here we're talking about a field where a kever is intact. It wasn't plowed over, but it was just lost. That's the kind of Beis HaPras that's metame ba'oel. But if you have an area where it was a field which was plowed over, the kever was plowed over, that's the kind of Beis HaPras that's not metame ba'oel. The Gemara says, "V'sada shenechrash bo kever Beis HaPras karilei." But is it really true that a field that was plowed over, the kever was plowed over? Now the Grove here changes it from shenechrash to she'avad. The Gemara is asking, is it really true that a field where a kever was lost, is that really called a Beis HaPras? Gemara says, yes. V'atanan, and we learned that in the Mishnah as well. It says shlosha Beis HaPras, and there are 3 areas that can be identified and called Beis HaPras. Sada shenevad bo kever, a field where a kever was lost. V'sada shenechrash bo kever, and a field where the kever was plowed over. V'sada buchen, and the field of weepers, like crying. And the Gemara says, "My sada buchen." What does it mean, a field of weepers? Rav Yoshua bar Abba mishmei de Ula Amar. Rav Yoshua bar Abba says in the name of Ula, what it means is as follows: Sada shemaftirin b'mesim. This was actually the field where they allowed the dead to be carried off to be buried. That's the sada buchen. V'tayim amayim. The Gemara says, well, what's the reason why that's considered tamei? What's the issue? That's the field they're taking the dead from and burying them somewhere else. So the Gemara says, Amar Avimi says, Mishum Yosh Bailim Naguba. The reason for this is because a situation where the Bailim have given up. What it's talking about here is as they're transporting the bodies, so sometimes some of the bones from the body fall off, and they give up hope. They don't try to recover them and bury them properly. They just leave them in this field. So that's the issue of Safek Tumah that happens in the Sada Buchin. As Rashi over here says, Shemaftirin Boas HaMesim Shekeshemevian Mesim Mimakom Lamakom, when they bring the dead bodies from one place to the other, look for it to bury. Kesheboin Besada Samach Leir Niftarin Elu Sheviam Mimakomon. When they get to the field near the city, so the people that brought it, they leave. V'holchin Lahem, and they go off. Uvan Anshe HaMakom Mekavlenosan, the other people receive it. V'rochzenosan Sham V'kovernosan. They bathe, they wash it, they bury it, they take over from there. V'tayim amay choshen bei misham tuma. Why is there a concern of tuma in this space? Misham yush bailam lefi sheviu mimakom rachok. Because when you're going to bring the body from far away, nedal delever v'nafal sham, some of the limbs fall off and they fall there. V'nisiyayishu elo alelu v'nichu sham, and sometimes they get left there. So that's the issue of tuma. And the Gemara continues, V'soda shenechrash bo kever lo bo itzion. Is it really true that if you have a field where the gravesite was plowed over, that doesn't need to be marked? V'atanya, but we learned in a brayso, motza soda mitzuyenes. Let's say a person finds a field that's marked. Ve'en yodua mativa. The person doesn't know exactly what's the story over here. Rashi over here explains, Ve'en yodea mativa im husoda shenechrash bo kever. He doesn't know if this was a field where the kever was plowed over. V'yachol leilech b'nifuach, and he can walk through the field and blow on the dirt of the field. He can inspect the field as he goes. V'imim nation never bo kever. Or maybe this is a field where a kever was lost. Ve'en yachol ikanis bo b'nefichi. He can't enter at all. D'metami bo oel, because there's a problem here of tumas oel. So what does a person do in such a situation? And the brayso continues, Yesh bo ilanos, if the field has trees, biyadua shenechrash bo kever, then it's known that this was a field where the gravesite was plowed over. And ein bo ilanos, but if there are no trees, biyadua she'avad bo kever, then he knows that this was a field where the kever was lost. Rashi over here says, Yesh bo ilanos biyadua shenechrash hasad letzorach ilanos. If there are trees, you probably plowed the field for the trees. V'yachol halech shena matami bo. Once you plow through the field, you can walk through the field. It's not a problem. There's no tumas oel. Alma bidaktani ba motza sada mitzuyenes the mitzayin beis hapras shenechresh. Seems pretty clear over here. You have identified a marked field, and it's possible that it's nechresh. It's possible it was plowed. That's the whole point. If you have trees, then you know it was plowed over. And ein bo ilanos biyadu shavad bo kever v'lo nechresh u'matami boel. Again, if there's no trees, then you know that the kever was lost within the field, and it is matami boel. And so again, it seems to be clear that a sada shenechresh bo kever is in fact marked. And the brayso over here continues. Rabbi Yehuda says, Ad sheyeh sham zaken o Talmud. No, you have to have an older person or some kind of a student, somebody who's knowledgeable. Somebody has to tell you what's going on over here. You can't rely on the fact that you see these simonim like the trees. Because not everybody's an expert in the matter. You have to find somebody that really knows. And Rashi over here explains, Rabbi Yehuda says, Liolam lo ave bechezkas shenechrash. It is not considered as a presumption that it was plowed over. Ad sheyeh sham zaken o Talmud chacham sheyodeh shenechrash. Unless you have an older person or a Talmud chacham who knows it was plowed over, you can't rely on the fact that there are some trees there to determine that it was plowed over. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Papa says, Kitan Yohahi, that particular brisa, which again seems to indicate that they would mark an area where the kever was plowed, that's talking Besada Sha'avad Bo kever. The case over there is that you had a field where a kever was lost, that Tzainu, and they marked it. So now Yesh Bo Ilanos, if there are trees there, Biyadua Shenechrash Bo kever, then you know that after it was marked, in other words, it wasn't marked because it was plowed over, there was a kever that was lost there. But now you see trees there, so then it's known that after the fact, they plowed over that area, they plowed over the kever. Ein Bo Ilanos, if there are no trees, Biyadua She'avad Bo kever, then you know it's just an area that was Avad Bo kever, it was lost, the kever was lost over there, but it wasn't plowed over. Rashi over here explains, Amar Papa Liolam Beis HaPrasha Nechrash Lo Bo Itzion. They never marked areas which were plowed over. Cases they already marked it when the kever was lost. And again, Yesh Bailanos Biyado Shenechrash La'achar Shetzainua. If you see trees, then you know it was plowed after they marked it. But really, if it would have been plowed in the first place, you wouldn't need to mark it. If there's no trees, you assume it wasn't plowed, you assume that it just has a lost kever. That's how Rav Papa answers up the question. And the Gemara continues, but why aren't we concerned that maybe there are trees on the inside and the kever's on the outside? In other words, just because you have trees, maybe you plowed over a certain area where the trees are, but maybe there's still a kever that's fully intact, that's on the outside of the field. Rashi over here says, maybe the area where there was tumah wasn't plowed, because that was on the outer part of the field, outside of the trees. It was only plowed between the trees. Maybe it's really a field where a kever was lost. Maybe it wasn't plowed over. What does it mean that you know for sure that the kever was plowed over? And so to that, the Gemara says, Kido Amar Ula. It's like Ula explained, Ba'omdin ala gvul, and he explained in a different context. We're talking about a situation where the trees are on the edge of the field. There is no area outside of the trees, which would be within the field where the kever could be intact. Hachanami Ba'omdin ala gvul, and so too over here, we're talking where the trees are along the border, along the boundary of the field. Rashi says, Ba'omdin ho'ilanos ala gvul and shel Rishas Harabim. They're right there in the boundary of the field of the Rishas Harabim. Devadei leka tuma me'avroi. There's certainly no tuma outside of the trees. The lokavri inshi b'Rishus Harabim. Nobody's buried in Rishus Harabim. Elabein ho'ilanos havituma. It's clear that the tumah would have been between the trees. V'nechrash b'shvil ho'ilanos, and the area was certainly plowed because of the trees. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Vav Amud Aleph.